A few years ago, I started implementing the body, mind, spirit process into my own warm up and practice time. And the end result has been that I enjoy my practice much more. I get much more accomplished. And what I do in the practice room seems to stick better. Now, some of that is that I've been doing this a lot longer than the typical high school or college student, but I also truly believe that body, mind, spirit is a big part of that as well. One reason I believe that so strongly is that I warmed up and practiced for many years, basically just concentrating on mind and body, which is totally understandable and I think very common. But I also think that many of us fall into the trap of thinking that the purpose of our practice is just to train our bodies or to make our muscle memory better, that it's all just about craft and not as much about art. And I will admit that the warm-up, of course, is mostly about physically readying yourself for a day of music making. And of course, a large portion of the practice session is focused on honing your technical skills and filling in gaps in your playing and refining all of the tools in your toolbox. But what I have found is that when I also have portions of my warm-up routine and practice session that are aimed specifically at waking up my brain and focusing on the tasks ahead of me, my whole day of music making is so much better. And beyond that, if I also have moments in my warm-up and practice where I check in with my heart and I do something that feeds me emotionally and I remind myself why in the world I'm here in my studio at 8 a.m. doing long tones in the first place, then the whole rest of my practice is now infused with meaning and purpose in a way that wouldn't be there if I didn't intentionally engage my spirit that way. One reason that I've concentrated on this so much recently is the research that keeps coming out about neural pathways and brain plasticity. We've known for a while now that when we're working on a motor skill, a skill that involves and requires movement, like riding a bike or throwing a baseball or eating with chopsticks or playing a brass instrument, neurons that fire together wire together. When I do a set of motions at the same time over and over, my brain starts to wire those different neurons together, making it easier and faster for my brain to do that set of movements, so that the behavior becomes not only easy, it becomes automatic. When we're starting out, we see a note on the page. We say, okay, that blob is an E flat. That's in third position. Third position is here. I will now go to that place and I will play an E flat. But after several hundred E-flat processes, that behavior becomes automatic. See an E-flat, play an E-flat. And you don't think about all the different things that go into it. You think about the entire movement as a whole. All of those separate instructions are now encompassed in a single instruction: play an E-flat. What we haven't always considered is that our brains can wire in not only movements, but thoughts and emotions as well. When we repeatedly have a certain thought or emotion in conjunction with behaviors, all of those things can get wired together. The implication being that on the negative side, that if every time you practice your fundamentals, you're thinking negative thoughts, I hate this is boring, this is useless, I stink at this, those thoughts could potentially get wired in, so that in another context, when you go to pull that fundamental tool out of the toolbox, the negative thoughts could come along with it. If you're practicing the David concertino over and over, thinking negative thoughts with each rep, or punishing yourself for every single mistake, or just trying to get through it, when you step onto stage to perform that David concertino, or step in front of a curtain at an audition for a job that you actually want, your brain is potentially going to bring up those negative thoughts as part of the package, the neural pathway that was set in all of those hours of practice. Remember that neurons that fire together wire together. On the positive side, just imagine if every time you're working on slurs or articulation exercises for the next 6 months, you're thinking about how you're going to use those skills to make wonderful music and increase beauty and understanding in the world. Don't you think that eventually you would feel differently about doing fundamentals? If every warm-up began by listening to your favorite goosebump-inducing aria or your favorite moment of a Mahler symphony, and then you begin to find your sound and wake up your tongue and your slide, and you start to think about your day and your practice from a place of fullness and thinking about how wonderful and miraculous music is, don't you think it might be a little easier to roll out of bed every day and do it again and again? If you make it a point to engage your spirit when practicing the first page of the David, those things can actually get wired in as well. When you play letter A, your body remembers what it's like to play that opening statement, loud and in tune and in time, but also your brain remembers the heroism and the excitement and the energy that you've wired into that as well. And what if you've wired into letter C, when your body remembers how to have wonderful smooth legato and how to keep the high range singing and not pinched and all that, but also remembers the tenderness and the beauty and the feelings of love, perhaps, that you ingrained in the practice room. I'll talk more about this in another video, but this is also huge in terms of performance anxiety. I and so many people have had the experience of practicing diligently, knowing you're prepared, knowing you have the ability to play something really wonderfully, and then stepping on stage and having no access to any of that. And I think a huge part of that comes down to how we practice and what we're thinking about when we practice. I think there are a lot of people who are out there doing the right things, doing the work, hugging the cactus, but unknowingly sabotaging their performances by what they're thinking or what they're not thinking when they practice. So I would encourage people to take these 3 principles of body, mind, spirit and see where they can implement them in their everyday warm-up and practice. The body is the how, the implementation of the plan, the actual movements that make the trombone go. The mind is the what, the method, the structure that guides the movements in an intentional way. And so important is the spirit. That's the why, the reason that I'm doing these Arbin studies, the reason I'm working so hard every day, the reason I want to make music in the first place. If your practice and your warm-up truly trains all 3 aspects of yourself, then it's truly effective practice.